The Committee for Economic Development is the public policy center of the Conference Board. Since its founding, CED has harnessed the power of business leadership to solve the nation's most pressing economic and social issues. As a nonpartisan, business-led organization, CED delivers well-researched analysis and reasoned solutions in the nation's interests to shape public policy that impacts our workplaces, communities, and government.
In an age of discord, when there's so much polarization in our country, CED, because of its nonpartisan nature, but importantly, that it's a unifying force in America, looking out for the best interests of our country. CED brings people, leaders from all walks of life, different industries, different ideas and views on the political spectrum. But when they're part of CED, the trustees too take a view of what's best for America, and they become a unifying force.
CED formed amid the height of the Second World War to help transition the nation from a wartime to a peacetime economy. Then, CED helped plot a course for prosperity in the post-war years. It helped shape the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe and helped establish a stable global financial system with the Bretton Woods Agreement. Not since then have those issues borne such consequences as they do today. As the nation continues to recover from a trifecta of social, economic, and public health crises of global proportion, CED is determined in its efforts to help chart a bipartisan path forward to a more prosperous economy and more just society.
I was invited by Lori to join CED about a year and a half ago, and I cannot think of a more pertinent time to have joined this organization where the membership of CED gives us all a platform to learn together, to have dialogue, and debate some of these toughest issues that are going on in our country today. And in so doing, it helps us all to have a platform to make a positive difference to our country.
Through its history, CED's work has been guided by the core principle of making capitalism sustainable for generations through sustained economic growth, prosperity, and equal opportunity for all Americans. Comprised of chief executive officers and key executives of leading U.S. companies, CED lends its voice to help shape economic policies that include efficient fiscal and regulatory policy, competitive and open markets, modernized infrastructure, accessible healthcare, a globally competitive workforce, education reform, and sustaining our democratic institutions.
Going forward, I think organizations such as CED will play a pivotal role for many of us, myself included. First, CED is one of the few places where we have major business leaders coming together in a nonpartisan, non-political way to talk about major issues of the day and indeed to provide some guidance and input into those issues. And I have participated, for example, in some of the briefings that the CED trustees have had with staff, with Hill members. I think that's incredibly important.
CED helped navigate the business and policy communities through the unprecedented challenges of this pandemic. Now, as the nation just begins to emerge from the fallout, one thing remains clear. We must continue to provide leadership in challenging times in order to lay the groundwork for a brighter, more just, and more prosperous nation.
Introducing the President of the Committee for Economic Development, Dr. Lori Esposito Murray.
Good evening. I'm Lori Esposito Murray, President of the Committee for Economic Development of the Conference Board. And I have to admit, this is a bit overwhelming. I'm looking around the room and I think, all totaled, I don't think I talked to this many people for the past 20 months. And to see you all in one night, and we are really thrilled to have you here. So thank you for coming in. It is my privilege to welcome you and to our virtual audience as well to the CED's 2021 Distinguished Leadership Awards. As you have just seen, although you may not have heard, CED's mission since its founding has been to harness the power of business leadership to try to solve the nation's most serious and challenging business, economic, and social issues. Tonight, we have, since 1991, we are honoring 6 outstanding business leaders and their companies for their corporate citizenship and business statesmanship. Leadership from trusted voices, though, today is now more important than ever. This year, the awards is paying special tribute to those who have shown exceptional leadership in challenging times. And that includes defeating the pandemic, economic recovery that provides equal opportunity for all Americans, and building a more civil and just society. Capitalism, at its best, provides equal opportunity for everyone, and it's critically aligned with the most important democratic principles of individual freedom and responsibility for the common good. And that is what our mission is and what we are trying to achieve, and that is what tonight is all about. It's about business leadership, making sure that capitalism functions at its best. In honoring leadership in defeating the pandemic, we have to start with our frontline workers. And tonight, it's my privilege to say we have joining us as our very, very special guests, 6 Northwell Health frontline healthcare workers who put their own lives at risk to serve their community, our community, to make sure that they were serving the common good. Thank you so much. It is truly our privilege to have you here. We could not celebrate this night and those goals without you. So representing all the frontline workers, the first responders, and the essential workers that many of you run companies who have brought them to, who are working with essential workers and working yourselves. So thank you. Thank you for representing that very important part of the story. So CED's work would not be possible without the trustees of the conference board and their support, and many of you are here tonight. And of course, Steve Odlin, who is CEO of the conference board and committed both during his entire career, both in the private sector and now at the conference board, in ensuring that we are leveraging business leadership for the common good. So thank you, Steve, very much. And of course, our dinner sponsors, thank you all for your generous support. And our CED trustees, thank you. Thank you for contributing your time, your work, your passion to working together with all of us at CED to try and achieve these incredible goals of solving some of these problems. A special thank you also goes to Roger Ferguson and Tamara Lundgren for co-chairing the dinner committee this year. And please join me as I ask Tamara to come on stage and share some of her thoughts on leadership today in challenging times. Thank you, Tamara.
So good evening, everyone. I want to begin by thanking everyone who has made this special evening possible. That includes our honorees, introducers, sponsors, and in particular, the CED and hotel staff. In COVID times, these events are much more complicated to produce, and I will say, much more appreciated by the attendees. So thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank my fellow trustees who are here tonight for their invaluable role they play at CED. Combining input from America's most purpose-driven business leaders who serve as trustees with the insights from one of the world's leading nonpartisan, data-driven think tanks is a big reason why solutions advanced by CED are so impactful. Tonight, as we honor 6 individuals for their bold leadership during challenging times, I cannot help but reflect on the life and legacy of former Secretary of State Colin Powell, who we sadly lost this past week. General Powell famously said, "Leadership is about solving problems. The day soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day you have stopped leading them." He also said, "Great leaders are always great simplifiers who can cut through an argument, debate, and doubt to offer a solution everyone can understand." These 2 principles, while always important, have been even more so during the pandemic. The leaders who are honoring tonight have exemplified these attributes. They have engendered the trust of all their stakeholders, working with them to help find solutions. And they've been excellent strategists and communicators, cutting to the chase of the problem, eliminating the unnecessary, and charting a path forward. To all the honorees and companies here tonight, we applaud you for your resilience, your passion, your leadership when the world needed it and continues to need it most. So I'll now turn the podium back over to Lori, the president of CED. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara, and thank you to all of the members, the CED members of the dinner committee this year. And now, turning to our honorees, whom we are recognizing tonight for their transformational leadership. Karen Lynch, President and CEO of CVS Health. Judy Marks. Judy Marks, President and CEO of Otis. John W. Rogers, Jr., founder. Founder, chairman, and co-CIO of Ariel Investments. Margaret Keane, executive chair of Synchrony. Nubar Afeyan, founder and CEO, Flagship Pioneering. And I have to mention co-founder and chairman of Moderna. And Brian Moynihan, chairman and CEO of Bank of America. So we will present 3 awards and then break for dinner. And please enjoy your appetizers while we're presenting the awards. We'll break for dinner and then present the 3 awards after the main course. So now I am pleased to introduce Mark Casper, Chairman, President, and CEO of Thermo Fisher Scientific, whom also has been leading the company in dynamic ways to combat COVID-19.
Thank you, Lori. It really is a pleasure to be here and to introduce Karen Lynch, President and CEO of CVS Health. She's making such a positive impact on healthcare and society overall. I've gotten to know Karen over the years very well, having served on the board of US Bancorp together, and both of us are avid sports fans in New England. Simply said, Karen is an amazing leader, a role model, and a champion of better healthcare for all. When the pandemic struck, she quickly pivoted CVS Health to play a major role in the pandemic response as a hub for both testing and for vaccine administration. And between May of 2020 and September of this year, the company has administered more than 32 million COVID-19 tests and more than 34 million vaccine doses. In this effort, CVS has played an emphasis on vaccine equity and education, establishing mobile vaccination clinics and testing sites in underserved neighborhoods, and an educational campaign that works with trusted local CVS pharmacy employees at the community level. The pandemic has underscored the importance of and the disparities in healthcare, and CVS is addressing underlying inequities at the root of many healthcare problems. The company's Transform Health 2030 initiative lays the groundwork for a $1.5 billion investment to provide equitable, easy accessible healthcare nationwide, as well as improve the broader health of communities, businesses, and the environment. Karen is also a dedicated champion of mental health issues, both personally and professionally. She and her husband, Kevin Lynch, recently funded a program on empathy, awareness, and compassion in education at Penn State. And she has long been an advocate for greater awareness and education for mental health and treating the whole person in healthcare. But perhaps her greatest impact is yet on the horizon, as Karen launches her strategy to transform hundreds of CVS stores into primary care centers capable of serving tens of thousands of patients a day, expanding patient access and the quality of healthcare. No wonder Fortune has ranked Karen #1 on the list of most powerful women. She clearly understands the role companies can have in making the world a better place and our responsibility to do so. With her leadership, CVS Health will continue to transform healthcare access, create opportunities, and improve our communities. It is my great honor to present Karen Lynch with the CED Distinguished Leadership Award for Corporate Citizenship.
Well, good evening, everyone. It is so nice to see the 3D version of all of you instead of having you just on flat screen on Zoom. Mark, I can't thank you enough for that warm introduction, and I have truly always valued your friendship and your insights. And I'm particularly grateful because it's Mark's earnings week, and he's here tonight, so thank you for that. Lori, I want to say thank you to the Committee for Economic Development and the Conference Board for recognizing me for this award. I also want to take a moment to congratulate my fellow honorees, Brian, John, Judy, Margaret, and Nubar. Congratulations. And I am so honored to be part of this distinguished group. For years, the CED has convened the best thinking and leadership across businesses and policy to tackle the most urgent and challenging issues facing our nation. They've demonstrated the proven track record of nonpartisan public-private partnerships and have consistently championed collaboration, equity, and opportunity, qualities that CVS Health prioritizes in everything that we do. And so I'm very honored, Lori, to accept this Distinguished Leadership Award on behalf of my 300,000 colleagues, many who have been on the front lines every day from the pandemic from the very beginning, and reflect this year's theme of leadership in challenging times. It truly has been a unique and challenging experience leading CVS Health during the pandemic, a time when America needed us most. And that's one I feel very privileged and honored to have. And I have to thank and take this opportunity to thank the countless heroes. Some of you are here today from across the country, from doctors and nurses to the scientists who are developing the vaccine, to the truck drivers and the community organizations who frankly all continue to be so selfless in their commitment to taking care of others. As Mark noted in his introduction, our colleagues met and continue to meet in this unprecedented moment in our country. And this award is actually their award, a testament to their innovative thinking, their resilience, and their dedication to the millions of Americans that we are very privileged to serve. Like the CED, CVS Health believes everyone deserves quality access to affordable health care that is simple and affordable. Guided by our purpose to bring our heart to every moment of your health, we're pivoting to offer more personalized solutions to meet people where they are in the community and virtually. So much of health is determined by our local environment. Things like access to secure housing, healthy food, and good paying jobs. This is why we always have to think local, listening, learning, and collaborating to better understand the services and solutions communities need most. Reimagining the healthcare system in this country requires us to simplify, to break down barriers in a system that can be confounding and complex. Putting the customer at everything in the center of everything that we do is extremely important to us. While I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish, we have so much more work to do. I want to talk a moment about a critical area of focus, which, as Mark noted, I am extremely passionate about. We are aggressively addressing the mental health crisis in this country, one of the crushing collateral damages of this pandemic. According to a recent study by the Kaiser Foundation, currently 4 in 10 adults report symptoms of anxiety and depressive disorder. That's 4 times what was noted in 2019. And I'm sad to tell you that suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in America. I believe it's imperative for the public and private sectors to step up and work together to create solutions before this crisis gets worse. And I'd like to take a moment to thank my husband, who is here this evening, for his efforts to normalize the conversation around mental health. But more importantly, I thank him for his unwavering support for everything that I do. These are times of great consequences. Our communities are depending on all of us to meet this critical moment. And progress requires partnership. Partnerships with community-based organizations, health systems, providers, and the broader business community. And so I want to close by thanking all of the distinguished leaders in this room and those that are watching virtually for boldly advancing ideas and initiatives to move our country and our economy forward with purpose and with impact. Thank you to the CED for this award, but more importantly, congratulations to the rest of tonight's honorees for their extraordinary and deserving accomplishments. Thank you.
Karen, thank you so much, and congratulations. One of the biggest tragedies of COVID, it was how disparate the effects were on minorities, women, and you are leading the charge in solving that. And we are grateful for everything that you're doing, and it's our privilege to honor you tonight. I'd like to now turn to our next honoree and our introducer, Ellen Kullman, who is President and CEO of Carbon and the former Chair CEO of DuPont. So thank you, Ellen.
You know, we're here to honor exceptional leaders in challenging times and talk about challenging times. You know, a health crisis, an economic challenge. What a time to spin Otis Elevator to a public company. But Judy Marks was ready for the challenge. I first got to know Judy in 2017 in July when she came to United Technologies to lead Otis. I was lead director at the time, and we were in the middle of strategic evaluations on what to do with Otis. So it wasn't soon thereafter. Judy was named CEO in 2019, and Otis was spun at the beginning of COVID, April of 2020. Now, it's not like Otis employees can work from home, or at least not many of them. I mean, they're responsible for moving 2 billion people every day in their elevators and their escalators. And that equipment has to be serviced, has to be safe, has to be ready, whether it's in a hospital or a business setting or an industrial setting. So Judy's focus from the start was on community. She'd often remark that Otis is in the life safety business, and that commitment extends to their employees, their customers, to the public itself who ride elevators every day. She and her team quickly partnered with Purdue University to study aspects of airflow, to understand the exposure risk to COVID associated with riding on an elevator. So they used science and the study's results to make changes, and change they did quickly, and making passengers more at ease. Judy's focus also extends to education. She not only extended the Scholars Program that's helped employees of Otis earn 5,500 degrees in 60 countries, but she and her team created a corporate social responsibility program called Made to Move Communities to engage students, to leverage their STEM skills, some of them they didn't even know they had, to solve some of the biggest mobility challenges. They provide mentorship, they provide financial grants and volunteer activities to encourage this next generation of problem solvers to embrace engineering. And I've known Judy to be a huge supporter of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And not only as a chair of Paradigm for Parity, where Otis Elevator is one of our brightest stars, but she and her team go a lot further. They created commitment to change, a framework to ensure all colleagues feel safe, welcome, and heard, implementing things like independent reviews to eliminate hiring bias and supervisor training to mitigate unconscious bias. They go into communities and give grants to support DEI programs. So it's not just a company thing, it's a community thing. And you can imagine with the number of 2 million customers globally, they operate in a lot of communities. So these are just 3 examples of how Judy and her team are leading in challenging times. And Judy's just 18 months into her tenure as a public company CEO. And personally, I really can't wait to see how they continue to exemplify this exceptional leadership. So congratulations, Judy, on being named CED Distinguished Leader.
Thank you, Ellen, for those kind remarks, and my sincere thanks to CED for this humbling and tremendous honor. I also want to thank some guests we have with us from Otis tonight. Sandra Quince of Paradigm for Parity is with us, and Mike Hyder and Penelope Talley of the Executive Leadership Council. Thank you for joining us tonight. And to members of our Otis Board of Directors, to our representatives from our employee resource groups, and my peer members of our Otis leadership team, I'd like to say this award belongs as much to you as it certainly does to me and to our broader colleagues across the globe. I am just humbled to be in the presence of these other awardees who have such vision and commitment, and I only hope that as the years go by, I can live up to some of the incredible results that you have set as role models for me. At Otis, we're immensely proud of our rich heritage.
You heard Ellen talk about 2 billion people a day who touch our product. We play an essential role in people's lives. And whether it's the iconic buildings you know globally, some of you, the residential buildings you live in, perhaps some of you who took the Otis elevators here in the Pierre tonight, we are everywhere. People are on the move. And we hold that responsibility dearly and with incredible responsibility and commitment to keep everyone safe and moving, whether you're in a transportation hub or in a commercial building as well. We have customers in over 200 countries and territories that our 69,000 colleagues serve every day. Together, we help safely move people, and we have been doing this with passion and with innovation for 168 years. And we started and lead this industry still today as #1 in this industry right here in New York City. It's where we started. But this sense of common purpose, this sense of commitment, this passion that we have was probably no more visible than when the COVID pandemic struck. Because we experienced it first, as you can imagine, in Wuhan with our 15,000 Chinese colleagues. So for us, this started in January of 2020, just as we were getting prepared to spin as an independent company. And while the coronavirus brought much of the world to a standstill, we're in the movement business. We couldn't allow that. And almost 50,000 of our 69,000 colleagues went to work every day as essential workers, keeping people moving, keeping hospitals open, keeping transit, helping food get delivered to upper floors of buildings for people who couldn't leave their residences. And we did all of that, again, with working so closely with so many of you, but we did all of that, again, with our focus on purpose. We heard from countless customers who thanked us and who have been customers for decades, and we believe will be our customers for decades to come, that we kept people safe and moving during the pandemic. But interestingly enough, with this incredible, rich traditional history where you can find our product taking care of people, again, throughout the globe, we're a young company. We're an agile company, and we're a company that after about 18 months gets to start every day knowing we're setting precedent. And I can't believe a better palette exists to be able to set precedent when you're starting out. And what we did and what crystallized for us in the middle of the pandemic and in times of incredible social injustice that we were experiencing here in the United States is this is when we stepped forward, working with our board, and said, who do we aspire to be and how are we going to get there? How are we going to behave and how are we going to create the company, albeit with a rich history, but the new company we want to become? So we stepped back as a leadership team and we came up with our 6-point commitment to change. And we first shared this with our 69,000 colleagues because we made a commitment to our colleagues so that everyone's voice could feel safe, welcomed, and heard. And then we shared it publicly, and we continue to share it publicly because we want the transparency to be held accountable for everything we're going to do, be it our training of our 8,000 supervisors, be it our focus and our commitment to mental health and employee assistance programs in every country we operate, or most importantly, just be it to where we're going to continue this journey and continue to ask ourselves the hard questions on how we can improve. But when you're in 1,400 branch offices in 200 countries and territories, you're in every community around the globe. And we knew we couldn't stop just by exploring how we could improve. We knew we needed to take this to the communities. So we started our first CSR program, another precedent, which we call Made to Move Communities, that allows us to take technology and merge it with emerging students, with ideas, with our mentors, to be able to help schools and students address mobility problems. And in our first year, we focused on mobility for the underprivileged in 12 countries and territories. This year, we're adding to it and focusing on mobility for the older population. That's the appropriate term I've been told. Aging population. Listen, we know we're still early in our journey, regardless of our history. We know we're going to continue to have hard discussions. We know we're going to continue to run into challenges, and we know we're going to continue to grow and learn. But the difference comes when you're courageous enough to confront this and to make a difference in every community where you live and work. So again, I'd like to thank the committee for this incredible recognition for such a young, old company. And on behalf of our 69,000 colleagues, I graciously accept it. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Your leadership is definitely inspirational, and I have to admit it was very powerful when you said, when we had our discussion on leadership in challenging times, very emphatically that it's the responsibility of business leadership to implement change. You are doing that, and you are also on the tip of the spear of salvaging our cities and moving them into the future after the impact of the pandemic on our cities, and that is so critical for economic recovery. So thank you so much for all you're doing. Our next introducer, I have to say, stepping back as someone myself who has spent my life in public policy in Washington, our next introducer walked into the White House, turned on the lights, and 8 years later, she walked out of the White House as the last person to turn off the lights. And to me, that is unbelievable resilience. And so it is my pleasure to introduce Valerie Jarrett, who will introduce our next award winner.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Lori. Good evening, everyone. I am just delighted to be here as we honor 6 extraordinary business leaders, including my dear friend, John Rogers, and a special shout out to our healthcare workers. We can't thank you enough for all you do. So many of you know John as a brilliant founder and now co-CEO of Ariel Investments. But I'm here to let you know that he is that and much, much more. I can't remember a time when I didn't know John Rogers. We grew up literally on the same block in Chicago on the South Side. We both attended the University of Chicago laboratory schools, and we lived in a true community where we were taught to appreciate our responsibilities and accountability to one another. John also had the good fortune of being raised by parents who loved him dearly, ensured that he received an excellent education, and set very high expectations for him. Not in terms of what he would do, they left that to him, but rather what kind of a person he would be. They instilled in John core values such as the importance of character, integrity, decency, and hard work, that trust must be earned and one's commitments must be honored. They gave him a moral compass that only pointed in one direction, true north, and a sense of responsibility to lead a purposeful life, doing his part to create opportunities for others. All qualities which John has in turn instilled in his daughter, Victoria, who is here with us this evening. John's passion for investing began at a very young age of 12 when his father began encouraging him to do research on stocks and then buy John those top picks. See, at an age when most boys we knew were playing sports and chasing after their first crush, well, John did that too, don't get me wrong, but he also began to develop the discipline and rigor about specific stock picks and the stock market more broadly that turned out to be the perfect launching pad to help prepare him to become the innovative and successful business leader that he is today. John and I moved back to Chicago after we were away for school in our early 20s, and not long, it seemed like as soon as we returned, John and I had dinner. And he told me that he was going to start a company of his own, like go out and begin his own company. Well, because we have a very frank and open relationship, I asked him if he had lost his mind. That nobody in their right mind was going to give him, anybody his age with so little experience, the capital necessary to start a business, particularly one that involved managing other people's money. He took my bluntness gracefully and simply smiled knowingly. Not long after that dinner, I learned from my dad that John had also approached him to invest in the company. My father enthusiastically embraced this idea. When I questioned my dad's sanity, he said he saw something very special in John. Dedication to excellence, a strong work ethic, and that John was an old soul, wise before his years. My dad believed that each generation has a responsibility to bet, albeit wisely, on the next. And he thought John was a smart bet. He joined the Ariel board from the very beginning, and he served until his death in 2011. He was so proud to be affiliated with Ariel and all it stood for under John's leadership. My dad was right about John, and I think John has since forgiven me for giving him such bad advice at the time. Beyond Ariel, John's business presence extends to many boardrooms, from McDonald's to Nike, the New York Times, Ryan Specialty Groups, the Barack Obama Foundation, and a trustee of the University of Chicago, just to name a few where he has made an indelible mark. And then there's John's love of basketball. True appreciation for the sport, the value of being a team player, good sportsmanship, relentless determination against odds, resilience, humility. They were all literally drilled into John when he was on the lab school team and then later as captain of the Princeton basketball team. He often credits those lessons for his approaches not just to business, but to life. And it was that same spirit that drove him to invest way back in 2006 in the now very famous Chicago Sky women's basketball team, champions that they are this week. For John is known as being a very patient, yet enthusiastic long-term investor. John's unique patience, diligence, and often contrarian investment philosophy, coupled with his indefatigable determination to fight for equitable public policies and business practices that level the playing field for all Americans, have contributed to his many successes. From founding Ariel in 1983, the first nation's Black-owned mutual fund firm, to creating Ariel Community Academy, a school in an underserved community near where we grew up in Chicago, that provides not only excellent education, but it focuses on financial literacy, the lessons that he learned from his dad so long ago. His commitment to teaching financial literacy is one of the many reasons why President Obama chose John to chair the President's Advisory Council on Financial Capability for Young Americans during his time in office. For decades, he has relentlessly advocated among his peers in the business community, and more recently with members of Congress and the White House, about the importance of focusing not just on supplier diversity, but creating strategies for business diversity so that lucrative fields where people of color have traditionally been excluded, such as financial and legal services, are more inclusive. And as we grapple with the inequities laid bare by this pandemic, John's hard work is now receiving the traction it deserves. And John has devoted 19 years to increasing the number of people on corporate boards, people of color, through the Black Corporate Directors Conference, focusing on 3 Ps, people, purchasing, and philanthropy. And on a more personal note, as you can probably tell, John's wise counsel and unwavering friendship have guided me through many challenging decisions. No matter how busy, John makes time for the people in his life. I trust him completely. He's one of the most loyal people I have ever known. An extraordinary business leader, a philanthropist, a father, and a friend, John is the epitome of the CED Distinguished Leadership Award, especially as you pay tribute during these challenging times. That is what John does. He steers the ship steady. He steers it straight ahead. He's inclusive. He has an enormous heart and a passionate desire to see change for the better. He unwaveringly stands for what is right, from equity in education and economic advancement to justice for all. Please join me in congratulating my friend John.
Oh, well, thank you, Valerie. I think that's the most warm and wonderful introduction I've ever received. So I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Valerie is, as many as you know, is had a lot to do with President Obama being elected, giving him advice well before the president decided to run, and helped him when it was a really difficult thing to do. When the president had just lost to Bobby Rush in the congressional race, and no one dreamed he would someday have a political future. And Valerie was there as the person raising the money and providing guidance and judgment and making all the difference. I think the president supported Valerie because all of us who know Valerie know that she's a brilliant business leader and has great judgment, amazing vision, and the highest level of integrity. So I'm proud to have her now replacing her late father on our board at Ariel Investments. So thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to thank CED for this important recognition. It's really a great surprise that I greatly appreciate. And want to also congratulate all the other honorees that are absolutely amazing accomplishments they all have created. And there seems to be a sense of shared values in the talks we've heard already today. So again, it's great to be on this, accept this award with so many other leaders doing so many amazing things here throughout the country and throughout the world. Valerie mentioned the boards that I'm on, and I'd just like to thank the boards for being here today. Fellow board members and leaders from Nike are here, folks from the University of Chicago and board members of the New York Times. One of my favorite places, of course, is McDonald's, where I go just about every day. So it is so fun to be on a board where you really understand the issues. And I have to give a special shout out to my daughter, Victoria. Like Valerie and myself and my daughter, we're all only children. So we share those challenges. And so thank you for being here, Victoria. I want to thank all of my friends and Ariel colleagues who are at the Ariel table. And so thank you guys for coming all this way. And I would just say briefly, we are at Ariel focused on trying our best to have, of course, the best investment performance and service you possibly can. But we have been working hard to try to make a difference when it comes to this ever-widening wealth gap in this country. This racial wealth gap gets worse and worse and worse. We all know the facts. I know all of you guys here know the facts. You're all experts in this area. My favorite data point comes from the Federal Reserve of St. Louis. It showed between 1992 and 2016, college-educated blacks saw their wealth decline 10%, while college-educated whites saw their wealth increase over 96%. So an extraordinary gap over a 25-year period, and it continues to get better. It continues to get worse and worse and worse. As Valerie talked about, we have some ideas around solutions, and I won't go through those again this evening, but we do believe that, part of the solution revolves around building up stronger black businesses, stronger black business leaders, especially in the parts of the economy, as Valerie suggested, where the wealth and opportunities being created today and that will be created tomorrow. We think the 3 Ps really are important, and we're hoping we can be on message around that. We can make a difference. As I close, I think about the fact that, Dr. King always had, of course, great ideas, and many of his ideas still resonate today here in our great country. And he often talked about the fact that many Americans of goodwill have deplored prejudice, but have accepted or ignored economic injustice. And he talked about the importance of it, how Black leaders and African Americans throughout our country needed to be integrated with power into every part of American life. And that's my dream, that if we can have the African American community really engaged in all aspects of American life, we'll all be able together to make a difference in this widening racial wealth gap in this country. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much for this really marvelous recognition. Thank you again, Valerie, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for what you have done and continue to do. This time of COVID, these past 20 months have been 20 months of tragedy, but also of opportunity. And the opportunity has opened our eyes and raised our consciousness to the change that must happen and can happen. And John, you've been at the tip of the spear and pushing for that change and mentoring Black executives and educating young Black professionals and young students in terms of financial awareness and astuteness. And it is really our privilege to honor you tonight. And thank you, Valerie, for your introduction. So we are now moving on to dinner. Please enjoy yourselves, and we'll be back for the 3 rewards. I'm Lori Esposito Murray, President of the Committee for Economic Development of the Conference Board. Welcome to CED's Leadership in Challenging Times series, where we feature outstanding business leaders who are recipients of CED's Distinguished Leadership Awards. This year, CED is paying special tribute to business leaders who have helped our nation navigate the many challenges before us, including the pandemic, an economic recovery that provides equal opportunity for all Americans, and building a more civil and just society. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with our 2021 honoree, Margaret Keane, who is Executive Chair of Synchrony, the nation's premier consumer financial services company. So we're at a important inflection point, both in terms of the economy, the pandemic, and also social issues. And looking ahead, what do you see as the most important challenges that Synchrony leadership will be facing? And what leadership lessons would you highlight as the most important that you learned during the past year and a half of these crises to carry forward?
Sure. So I think that the really important piece for all of us, CEOs, everyone, is we have to continue to look at the economic disparity. Because I think if you really step back, and even with the George Floyd issue, if you really dig deep, there's a lot of economic disparity that's causing a lot of problems. And I think it came to light in many of these communities, even just in terms of healthcare, right? So I think we as leaders have to continue having that dialogue and thinking through how can we continue to help and influence. The second piece I think that's really important is we need to continue to work with our employees to really make sure that we're giving them the right skills to really grow their careers. And you know, if you start out as a call center rep in Synchrony, you should feel like you could be the CEO someday. I mean, I started out in a call center. So how do we continue to lift people up and give them that ladder so that they can continue to excel in that career? And I think, you know, if we can take people from a salary to, from an hourly to a salary level, that's a big deal for people. That's a game changer for families. And I think that's something we spend time thinking about inside Synchrony. I think that's really important. So I think we got to continue both internally in our companies and even externally where we can help to have that level of influence and continuing to talk about things. You know, I think something as simple as, look, we all saw the videos of kids like in McDonald's trying to do their homework because they didn't have internet at home. You know, I mean, these are pretty, internet is like basic now, right? It's like someone compared it recently to like electricity in the, you know, in the 20s, I guess, right? Not everyone had it. And then they just made a decision, we're going to get everyone electricity. We almost need that kind of thinking to really fix some of these fundamental areas that I think are part of how we operate today. And I think the internet's a good example of that. You know, in terms of my lessons, you know, I would say you know, I've worked a very long time. I would say this past year was probably the most challenging year as a leader. And what I learned through this process is everyone was impacted so many ways, and people were really afraid, particularly around the pandemic. They were really afraid, and they continue to be nervous. You know, we do now it's down to like every other week, I believe, kind of an all-employee call where people can get on and ask questions of medical experts. We've kind of rotated medical. We get 3,000, 4,000 people on these calls, so people are still asking questions. So I think what I learned was I needed to be very visible. As an example, when we first started our first all-employee, we were doing, you know, just a kind of a phone call so you can call in kind of thing. And I was like, no. Our employees need to see us. They need to see that we're calm. They need to see that we're confident. And so I just kept reiterating, we're going to be okay. Everyone's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And I think that's what employees were and people were looking for. And we had families on. I'm not even kidding. We had full families on many of these calls because there was so much challenge and nervousness. And we did a lot even for families around social injustice. We had experts come in. We had folks figure out how to talk to children. How, as a parent, do you talk to your children about the pandemic? How do you talk to your children about social injustice? And we had all kinds of groups. And I think people were looking for that kind of support throughout this year. So I think that's something that, you know, I think now it's not necessarily going to go away, because I do think now people are looking for information and confidence. And I think that's going to continue.
And how are you measuring progress? What benchmarks are you setting?
Well, we have a couple. We actually, before the pandemic, we actually put out, the leadership team felt before George Floyd, before any of this, we're like, we need to promote more people of color. We're not excelling there. We had done a really good job in certain areas, but we were lacking, particularly men of color. And we had created this program where we were bringing folks together to really get them more development, a little more exposure. And we just took that program and now have really expanded it. And so we're looking at that program and the number of promotions. So we're actually looking at real numbers. We want to make sure that, you know, and look, we're not going to solve this overnight, but if you don't have numbers and kind of a measurement system to say, are we making progress, you're never going to get there. We use our Great Places to Work survey because that survey is a culture survey, and there are a lot of open-ended questions that can really give you a sense. One of the things they've been working on is this question around feeling like you belong. I don't know if they have the question down right yet. I think we're all still trying to figure it out. But, you know, there's one thing to say you have a diverse and inclusive group or a company. It's another thing that people walk in the door every day or online and actually feel like they belong and could be their true self inside a company. And that's where I think you really make a difference, where people feel like I can come in and be who I want to be, when I want to be it, and not feel, you know, threatened in any way or feel like I'm fully accepted. That measure is a hard measure to get to, I must admit, but it's one we keep trying to chase a little bit, because I think that's when you really know you have a very inclusive culture that accepts everyone.
You know, the focus in terms of lifting employees up has been on making sure there's mentorship, sponsorship. Who were the most influential role models for you?
You know, there are probably, there's a handful that I really look at. You know, one is Dan Schulman from PayPal. You know, I think Dan is just a very unique individual. He's someone where I would say we connect because we have this sense of purpose that's bigger than just ourselves and our company. And, you know, I look to Dan, you know, he's an incredible leader and he's just an incredible person in terms of the things that he's done. You know, I think the other one that I just had lunch with him a couple of weeks ago is Ajay Banga from MasterCard, another person who, again, I think aspires to do the right thing and lift up MasterCard and the company in a way that's really giving back and thinks about culture very seriously. So, you know, I'd say those two are kind of at the top of my list in terms of I look at what they do, I chat with them, you know, we actually, I believe, have a connection because of the values and the way we all think.
Today, I have the privilege of speaking with our 2021 honoree, John W. Rogers, the co-CEO of Ariel Investments, the global value-based asset management firm he founded in 1983. So, John, could you elaborate on economic justice a little bit more? You talk about the 3 Ps. What is the challenge, and what role, what actions do you believe corporations can and should be playing?
Well, I think we have a conference every year that we've done with Charles Tribbett from Russell Reynolds for the last 18 years. And now we have Deloitte as one of our partners. And at our conference, we bring together now, we've roughly 200 directors, primarily African-American and Latinx directors. We bring in CEOs from all different types of businesses, from David Rubenstein to Jamie Dimon, from Ken Chenault to Ursula Burns. It's been an extraordinarily diverse group of board leaders who've come to our event. We have great speakers who often are there to motivate people to be more outspoken and fighting for civil rights within the boardroom. So over the years, we've had Dr. King's best friend, Harry Belafonte. We've had Andy Young. We've had Reverend Jackson, Reverend Sharpton, Congressman Clyburn, and of course, Barack Obama. We've had these leaders who are there to remind directors they have a responsibility, again, to speak up and speak out the way that the late Congressman John Lewis, who came to our conference one year, said that when you see something that's not right, that's not just, you have a moral responsibility to speak up and speak out and make good trouble. So we've asked all of our minority directors when we leave our conference each year to commit to measuring 3 Ps. One, corporate America is doing very well this year, is around philanthropy. Making sure that you're not just over-indexed to the local hospital or university or museum, but are thinking about civil rights organizations, economic justice organizations, and making sure you're spreading out those dollars. And we know many corporations are doing a lot more with historically Black colleges and other organizations like the National Urban League, et cetera. The second P is around people. But what we remind directors of is just not measuring people broadly across all categories, but making sure you're keeping track of the diversity in the C-suite, diversity on the management committee, and making sure that you're truly having African-American and Latinx directors at the highest levels of corporate America. And you as a director have the ability to change that paradigm by speaking out and holding management teams accountable for the diversity of their management teams. And then the third P is purchasing. It's all about making sure that you are spending money not only in the traditional old-fashioned way of supplier diversity, but having an understanding that our economy has become a professional services, financial services, and technology-based economy. And that if we're going to make a difference in solving this wealth gap, you've got to spend money with companies in all aspects of your spend. Keep track of your spending by category and get rid of that term supplier diversity and include the term business diversity to signal that your company's open to doing business with minority firms, everything they do, from legal services to investment banking services to technology to whatever you spend money on. Keeping track of that spending by category is that third P.
Can you share with us the initiatives that you've undertaken and why you selected the initiatives that you have as your priority for your community engagement?
Well, thank you. We've done several things. A lot of it starts with the values that my father taught me. He was a Tuskegee Airman, flew over 100 missions, and every birthday and every Christmas after I was 12, he bought stocks for me instead of toys. And he wasn't wealthy. It would be $250 of Exxon or, $250 of our local utility, Commonwealth Edison. And he let me keep the dividends, and I learned about investing and fell in love with the markets. So as we had some success at Ariel, we decided that financial literacy would be our focus. We would try the best of our ability to make sure that young people, and especially young people of color, were exposed to the stock market. And when the former Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, worked at Ariel, when he was starting his career after he finished playing basketball in Australia, Arne came and worked with us and headed up our Ariel Education Initiative. And our first big project, we created a small public school called the Ariel Community Academy, where we created this financial literacy curriculum that's really, really robust, and where every child understands that they're going to spend time at our office learning how to pick stocks, how to do research. We're going to be going down to their school near the North Kenwood Oakland area, not far from the University of Chicago, teaching them about what the markets are all about and what it means to be in the investment industry as a potential career path for these young people. But the heart of it is that every first grade class gets a $20,000 class gift, and they watch us manage it for the first 6 years. And then in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, the young people get to pick real stocks with real money. And again, trying to replicate my dad's story. And it's just been a wonderful thing to see these kids grow up. You know, I've been on the McDonald's board for 18 years, and for a number of years, we would take the 40 kids every year to the McDonald's annual meeting, and the kids would get a chance to ask a question at the annual meeting, and then have lunch with Don Thompson, the CEO, and Andy McKenna, the chairman of the board, and learn about what it means to run a large public company. And, you know, we wanted the kids exposed. So the Ariel Community Academy has been one of our key things. Melody Hobson runs a program in Chicago called After School Matters, which is the largest after-school program in the world, actually. It was started by Maggie Daley, the former First Lady of the city of Chicago, who in her extraordinary leadership created this wonderful event where we could pay young people to work in various jobs after school and learning about everything culturally to investing to what have you. So this educational effort after school fits very nicely with our financial literacy efforts. And then finally, our latest program that we're proud of, which is smaller, is we created a program at the University of Chicago for minority students to get paid internships to work in the investment offices of major endowments throughout the United States. And we've had 64 young people go through the program, and I think there's no better place to learn about the investment world than being inside of an endowment. And to think about a career path of endowment management is something that young people of color have had no exposure to often, never thought about.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the role models in your life and how they helped you to mold your leadership values.
Oh, wow. Well, I've been very, very lucky. I've had great parents. And my mom, her name is Jewel Lafontant, was the first African-American woman to graduate from the University of Chicago Law School in 1946. And she really taught me that anything is possible. She just was always there in my corner, and seeing her success and her leadership skills were really, really important. The other thing that, you know, is important is that I got to meet, Chicago used to be the mecca for African-American entrepreneurship in this country. And we had these giant companies. John Johnson had created Johnson Publishing, which created Ebony and Jet Magazine, that many of you have heard of. They had a downtown office building on Michigan Avenue, you know, more than a dozen stories. It was a fantastic role model for what an African-American entrepreneur could build in this country. And at the same time, there was a man named George Johnson, no relation to John, who built up this huge hair care company called Johnson Products, which was the first African-American company to ever be listed on a major stock exchange. And they had products called Afro Sheen and Ultra Sheen hair care products. He started Soul Train, a television show with Don Cornelius. Some of you are too young to remember that. He started Independence Bank, that became the largest black bank in the country. And so what I learned from those two giants was that you could build a real business, do it in a world-class way as an African-American in this country, and not only, you know, create wealth for your family and your multi-generations, but also you'd be employing people. You could be involved in political empowerment for our community. You could be involved with philanthropy for our community. And they were just these folks that just had this enormous impact. They just didn't just have their head down doing their jobs. They showed that they cared for others at the same time. And those are extraordinarily valuable, very, very valuable for me to see as a young person.
Today, I have the privilege of speaking with our 2021 honoree, Judy Marks, President and CEO of Otis. So, Judy, how did you respond? Share with us, with the crisis management that you brought to bear, the leadership that you found was necessary, both within Otis with your employees, then immediately in terms of addressing the health and safety concerns of your customers, of people within cities and your buildings. And lastly, how did it affect, you were just starting your leadership role at Otis. How did it affect your strategic plans for the company?
Listen, there's two things we did not have at the beginning of COVID. We did not have a global playbook, and I'm not sure any corporation did, on how to respond simultaneously to this spread and societal impact. So that was the first item. And the second, candidly, is it was not in our enterprise risk management framework or tool to basically have planned for this global pandemic. However, we did have playbooks on dealing with other crises. public incidents, incidents of nature. We deal with earthquakes, hurricanes, and what that means to buildings and to people all the time. It's just more localized. So we really mobilized everyone simultaneously. We had far more business practice sharing. And we really, wherever this hit in the globe, we would have a leading country who shared what they just went through. First and foremost, we cared about the health and safety of our colleagues. 69,000 colleagues here at Otis globally, 40,000 of them work in the field, and another group work at our 18 manufacturing facilities. And to this day, they go to work every day. They leave their homes, no matter where they are, even in India, other places, and they are there to respond, again, to keep business moving, to keep operations moving, and to keep people's personal health and safety. So we took that seriously. We focused on PPE. We focused on our own colleagues first. We knew there was concern. And concern about people initially in terms of touch. So we went to a very agile, rapid mode and came out with health solutions, touchless buttons, gesturing technology, voice technology, the ability to use your iPhone or your mobile phone to be able to call and dispatch an elevator. And we brought all of these to market rapidly. And then finally, we knew that we needed some science behind this, and we commissioned Purdue University and an airflow expert to share science-based data on how safe elevators truly are, because they already have ventilation by code. But we were dealing with the media, finding that, finding the phenomenon and the phenomenal stories, and so we went with kind of science and fact-based data that was commissioned, and an elevator ride is just as safe as going to a grocery store, or even safer than dining outdoors. And we shared that information publicly. We think that's our role as a thought leader. In terms of strategy, our strategy stayed on track, but this just accelerated the adoption of technology and the application of new and novel thoughts and innovation. And that came from all over the company. We believe everyone and anyone has the ability to bring forward something that makes Otis better and the communities we serve better. And we just saw that, continue to see it today. So it's been a fascinating 15 months. We did spin publicly on April 3rd of 2020, back to our independent status, which we hadn't been since 1976. And we were able to do this probably in the most challenging of times. Couldn't be more proud of our colleagues.
Judy, you never faltered on your corporate responsibility program, Made to Move communities, either during this pandemic. And matter of fact, you've even increased that commitment. Can you share some of more detail on that initiative as well, which has been very impactful?
Thanks. So, again, everything for us was precedent setting. We knew our corporate social responsibility, what we chose to do would really set us for our future. And we decided to focus on STEM, but in a way that was applicable to our industry. Again, when you think about the challenges people will face with aging populations, with buildings continuing to rise, with aged buildings that don't have elevators that need them so that seniors can still have an enjoyable life, we needed to solve some mobility challenges. And we know that the best solutions come from anyone and anywhere, not just inside Otis, but in our expanded family. So we set up a special Made to Move Communities CSR program where we started initially this year with about 14 schools in 9 countries and territories throughout the globe, and held a competition and did it all where we could in person if we were able to meet in certain locations. If not, we did it all virtually. And we encouraged the first problem to be solved for mobility was actually granting mobility access in communities impacted by the pandemic. And these students with Otis mentors just came up with such creative solutions. We're going to continue to grow the program as we grow. And so it was very successful. I think it's filling a void. There are a lot of, I commend everyone who's involved in STEM. I'm an engineer myself and really want to focus on continuing to get our youth excited in it. But we tried to focus it again on problems and verticals that may not be addressed right now.
Looking at the past 18 months, what do you think were the most important leadership lessons that you learned and you could share
with the larger business and citizens across the nation.
I think there's a few things. One is you can never communicate enough. And, leading a global business, the hours are long. You decide, are you rising with the sun? Are you still on all these video conferences late into the night? But you need to engage. You need to be seen. People need to hear you and know that you're real, that you're living through some very similar challenges as many of your colleagues and communities, and that you're going to be transparent about that. So I think empathy and communication are things we've all learned. The other is, as a leader, I think beyond dealing with a crisis, which we all get challenged with, beyond mitigating risk, which is part of our role, the key is understanding when to move from crisis management to when do you pivot. When do you pivot to accelerate your business? And that is really the telltale sign, because we understood that our business would come back. We had a very resilient business. Our service business is 60% of our business and 80% of our profit. So our service business, this was probably its biggest test on resiliency, and it did well. But we had to be ready to come back strong. And to do that, Lori, we needed our colleagues with us. And so we created trust as we went through this crisis. We didn't lay anyone off. We dealt with some furloughs where needed. We negotiated with works councils and with unions wherever appropriate, with collective bargaining. We all made agreements. We all made sacrifices, but we were all true to each other. And I think it was that trust, which with the decision when we were going to accelerate as we were in the fourth quarter last year, getting ready to pivot, getting all the resources ready, is really what's helped facilitate, our successful 21.
Today, I have the privilege of speaking with our 2021 honoree, Brian Moynihan, Chairman of the Board and CEO of Bank of America, one of the world's leading financial institutions. And, to take you back to the social issues, under your leadership, B of A has undertaken important initiatives, that have been spotlighted by the pandemic, that are front and center in terms of society and wage inequality, diversity and inclusion, hiring and training. Can you share some of those with us? I mean, they're really significant initiatives, not only for the immediate term, but for the long term as well.
Sure. So we think of it sort of two ways. One is, we're a company of opportunity. So how we hire, how we promote, how we measure diversity from our board of directors to our management team through every layer in the company, ensuring that that percentages of a population at every level, represent what's in society. Then testing for equal pay for equal work with outside people to test to make sure that we're doing that. Then, targeting hiring programs to help. We have a Pathways program, which hired colleagues, teammates from low and moderate income neighborhoods. We announced we do 10,000 of them in 5 years. We did it in about 3 years, and now we've announced another round of that program, and likewise with military veterans and everything. And then how we spend our money, our vendor programs with minority and women entrepreneurs. 20% of all our spending goes to companies controlled by women and minority entrepreneurs, and that was a good thing. So we've always been a company of opportunity, and including our starting wage. We want people hired to come in here with a career mindset. So our starting wage, we announced in 2017, would go from $15 to $20 an hour. By 2021, we pulled that in a year early and moved to $20 an hour. Now we've announced we're going to $25 an hour. That is basically about ensuring that all our teammates have a living wage, have a strong wage with strong benefits, ability to have a family and be successful, and importantly, ability to invest their time in their careers and through our tuition reimbursement, other things, to continue to take advantage of our training and outside training to become with a career mindset, and that's worked. But then you had to move what we do outside the company. And I would say that we had recognized there's a lot of work done by a fellow named Raj Chetty and John Friedman about opportunities and the opportunities. So we were a company of opportunity, but frankly, our home territory in Charlotte was ranked in Chetty's study as 50th out of 50 in terms of being a community opportunity. And we, as a company, were studying that and thinking about that. And then, lo and behold, we had the pandemic, which obviously started a whole bunch of questions. And then the horrible killing of George Floyd. And we said, we got to do something about the opportunity outside our company. So we announced $1 billion program, which is now $1.25 billion program. pillars of housing, jobs, health, and education, and putting our resources to work, but putting the resources to work in an interesting way. So we went about doing. We offered 5% to buy up to 5% of common stock of all the minority depository institutions in the country, and a bunch of them didn't need it or didn't want it, but we invested in 20 of those. That's behind us. We went out and looked for private equity firms who were run by women and Blacks and Latinx, Asian Americans, Native Americans, and then would invest in companies run by women, Black, Latinx, Native Americans, Asian Americans, and we couldn't find that many generally, so we went out and surveyed our teammates, or what we call market presidents, that represents all markets. We've now committed to 100 of those firms. They'll invest in 2,000 or 3,000 companies. It's about $300 million committed so far. 250 to 300 million. We'll go up to 350 million. But importantly, a lot of clients are coming to us and say, "Hey, can we invest? Because if that firm's good enough for you, they're probably good enough for me, and I don't have the professionals." But that we do in the investment bank to analyze it. And then we basically went to work on the education side, and we gave contributions to the HBCUs. Some HSIs and some community colleges, really geared two different ways. One's about four-year college graduates and career development, helping them align to the great companies like Bank of America and these other employers. Community college is much more about skills. And so we've developed a lot of programs with people working on skills development, other CEOs in Charlotte and other cities, the 110 Initiative, work we're doing with various other constituents on this idea of jobs by companies of the stock and trade to give people opportunity, and we're working on that. And then
we will now present our Distinguished Leadership Award, named in honor of Peter G. Peterson, who was our longest standing trustee of the Committee for Economic Development. And this Distinguished Leadership Award, named for Peter G. Peterson, recognizes the outstanding business leader whose own legacy reflects the leadership values of Peter G. Peterson. So presenting this award is Tom Wilson, who will be presenting virtually, Chair, President, and CEO of Allstate Corporation.
Laurie, CED is a fabulous organization. The work you foster makes the world better. I'm here to begin the recognition of Margaret Keane, whom I know well, having benefited from her leadership on Allstate's board of directors. Margaret's story is built on a bedrock of values: honesty, responsibility, passion, and drive. She started her career in a call center, and now she leads a leading consumer finance organization, enabling millions of Americans to deal with the financial ups and downs in their lives. And while Margaret didn't found Synchrony, she's the architect and builder who created an independent public company that's purpose-driven. She embedded her values into its strategy, business practices, and culture. Margaret has amazing empathy. She truly understands others' perspectives. She knows what it's like for female executives to compete and win, having successfully achieved success all along the corporate ladder. But no matter how high she climbs, she understands that it's important for our leaders to ensure we can all be our true selves. As a result, she's a champion of diversity, inclusion, and equity. She believes, practices, and celebrates it at Synchrony. Allstate and I have benefited from her wisdom and insights. Her expertise in transforming into a digital enterprise and how we ensure that works for employees has been invaluable for us. When our board had a half-day session on diversity, inclusion, and equity, Margaret was a leader amongst leaders, sharing her experiences in ways that were actionable. She freely shares her leadership beyond Synchrony. She's a board member of Build On and Memorial Sloan Kettering's Cancer Center. At the same time, she's a wonderful mother, spouse, sister, and friend. Margaret is authentic and empowering. With Margaret, there's just reality and wisdom. It comes without judgment. Her leadership is needed now more than ever. America's culture and economy, our politics, they don't evolve in a straight line. There are dramatic and sometimes violent ups and downs as we move towards a more prosperous society. It is at these inflection points where leadership from individuals such as Margaret is needed to ensure America fulfills its potential to make the world better. So Margaret's recognition tonight is not just for what she's accomplished. It is a celebration of what is yet to come. Margaret Keane, a fabulous leader.
Thank you, and thanks to Lori and the entire team at the Committee for Economic Development for this honor. I also want to put a special shout out here to the table over here of our frontline healthcare workers. I come from a long line of family members who are frontline workers in NYPD and FDNY and nurses, so I know what it means to really give back, so thank you very much. I also want to send a special thanks to Tom for all his kind words. And of course, thanks to Peter Peterson and the Peter G. Peterson Foundation for this recognition. It's truly an honor to join all of you tonight and to be recognized among such incredible leaders, so inspiring, all of you. In reflecting on Peter's legacy, I think we remember him most for two things. He committed to the idea that securing long-term financial sustainability was our nation's most fundamental challenge. And two, he was always thinking about the next generation and how to best serve them. Peterson was focused on the challenge of fiscal sustainability. He believed firmly that building long-term financial sustainability was critical to avoiding future crises. But I take this argument one step further. The key to crisis avoidance is people, and more specifically, advancing today's worker. We cannot deliver 21st century results without a 21st century workforce. To preserve and enhance our workforce, we must focus on three areas. We must rethink how we work. We must build a foundation that emphasizes skills and experiences over experience and degrees. And we must become a more inclusive workforce. The best companies of today and tomorrow are those that create flexible, supportive solutions to allow workers to bring their whole selves to work. And where all employees, from interns to executives, have the resources they need to thrive as people first and colleagues second. This starts at the top. Leadership sets norms and provides the infrastructure and flexibilities that makes that possible. Building a workforce that reflects how people live and work today starts with understanding and responding to changing times and changing needs. We all understand the seismic shift that has taken place over the last 2 years. Nearly 80% of jobs in finance and insurance moved remote during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the past, my industry has been slow to change our culture about remote work. I count myself among the leaders reluctant to transform a culture that embraced work from home, and I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. During the pandemic, like many companies, we changed course and found work from home worked. We then took a step further and empowered our employees with flexibility to change where they work at a post-pandemic. Our team now has a choice to work where is right for them and their families. This could be in an office, at home, or a combination of two. This kind of flexibility and care are especially important when it comes to retaining women in the workforce. The pandemic has set women, especially working moms, back further than where they were before the pandemic. And sadly, employment levels for women aren't expected to go back to where they were for several years. A large reason for this is the inflexibility that remains in corporate America. We have an opportunity to change this. Together, we can make jobs more accessible and supportive for the demands of today's workforce, especially for women
and communities of color. Look, the truth is our future relies on our ability to train and upskill our workforce, staying ahead of skills that will be required by all our organizations. The next generation needs opportunities to learn, grow, and build the skills of the future. For many, this will mean pursuing education through traditional means. For others, it means building skills through non-traditional training programs and experiences. Synchrony embraces both through our Education as an Equalizer program, our Skills Forward Certification Reimbursement program, and our work to empower those in our community to acquire the skills needed to thrive in the workforce of the future. As we sit here tonight, a collection of leaders from the public and private sectors, I challenge us to continue to find new and innovative ways to build a workforce that's prepared for the 21st century. All of this builds on the most important step we must take to build the workforce of tomorrow. We must expand the table, become more inclusive and representative of the diversity in our society. As I've said to our teams for years, our business must be as diverse as the people we serve. Delivering this is not easy. It can only happen through establishing a culture that supports and develops women, people of color, and those from other underrepresented groups. In my life and career, I've been the beneficiary of others' commitments to inclusiveness. That developed a work ethic and drive in me. But as a female leader, even as I was growing my career, I still felt like there were times when I didn't belong at the table, when I wasn't accepted, and maybe even worse, dismissed. And that's why I've made it my mission to pull up chairs for others, to increase the diversity of our tables. It's why at Synchrony, we are partnering with the 110 organization, working alongside their partners to hire and promote 1 million Black Americans over the next 10 years. And why we are committed to paying family sustaining wages across our business. We just moved to $20 an hour. And I can tell you, we had so many employees tell us $20 an hour, how it changed their lives, how they didn't have to work a second job, how they could be home with their families at the dinner table. Game changing, $20. I encourage us all to really think about a living wage for all our employees. Delivering a more Thank you. Delivering a more inclusive table also requires taking the time to develop the next generation of leaders. We're aspiring to deliver this through our recently launched Latinx Executive Alliance, a coalition of cross-industry C-suite executives and business leaders dedicated to help Latinx employees advance in corporate America. The reality is simple. A diverse workforce is a complete workforce, and each of us here tonight can play a part in moving us forward. I challenge each of us here tonight, myself included, to step forward to be part of that expanding table. Peter Peterson encouraged us to grow not only as business leaders, but as business patriots, a word that's so important today, as stewards of the public good. For me, that starts and ends with putting people first. This requires a commitment to building a workforce that offers choice and flexibility in how, when, and where employment works. It means investing and delivering opportunities for individuals who acquire skills and get an education. And above all, truly valuing people means expanding the table and committing to inclusivity. There's no question this work is really hard, but if there's one thing I've learned over the course of my career, is that it's absolutely worth it. I want to recognize and thank each of you for carrying this work forward. I want to thank my family, my husband who's been at my side for 38 years, and my children for supporting me throughout my whole career. And it's my honor to be with you here tonight, and I thank you all so much. Thank you.
Margaret, thank you. pulling up chairs for others, that really is the embodiment of what Pete Peterson wanted us to make sure that all business leaders remembered. So thank you, Margaret. And now it is my true privilege to introduce Ken Frazier, Executive Chair of the Board of Merck and a CED trustee. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you very much. I want to start, though, before I get to my appointed duty to introduce the next awardee by saying to all our frontline workers that are here, and representing all the frontline workers in America, there's simply no words that can adequately convey the depth of our gratitude to you for your selflessness, your dedication, your courage, and your compassion. Without you, our nation would still be in the darkest ages. And so I thank you again for what you've done for all of us. And I know that words are not enough. We need to support you with actions, and that is what we need to do. So thank you very much. I had the distinct honor this evening of presenting one of this year's CED Distinguished Leadership Awards to Nubar Afeyan. This year's awards pay special tribute, as you know, to people who have demonstrated leadership in a most challenging period, including during the COVID-19 pandemic. One cannot have such a tribute or consider where we would be in this pandemic without recognizing Nubar and the incredible work of Flagship Pioneering and Moderna, a company that has become synonymous with the COVID-19 vaccine. Nubar's leadership has made Flagship Pioneering one of the preeminent biotechnology and life science innovation firms. But more important than his business accomplishments is what his initiative, leading the fight against COVID-19, has meant to our world. Under Nubar's leadership, Moderna pioneered mRNA technology to successfully develop and manufacture a COVID-19 vaccine in record time. So I just want to make sure you understand, for those of us who are in the scientific business, we fail 90+% of the time. It took incredible foresight and commitment for Moderna to not only invest in the science, but also to be prepared to manufacture that vaccine when the data showed that it was a great vaccine. So I want to just say that this impressive leadership hinged, again, not only on the great science done in the company, but on the willingness to take bold risks in the context, again, of a novel pathogen. And we have a person here, Kizzmekia Corbett, who was instrumental in identifying the spike protein, so thank you for that. So again, taking bold risks in the context of a novel pathogen and putting a laser-like focus on rapidly advancing biotechnology. And while the life-changing work of Moderna alone is worthy of this recognition, Nubar's stewardship of Flagship Pioneering has led to numerous other advancements. In fact, since its founding in 2000, Flagship Pioneering has launched more than 100 science-based businesses, filed more than 12,750 patents, and has created a pipeline of more than 50 clinical programs. It's just actually amazing when you think about those numbers. For the past 2 decades, Nubar has dedicated Flagship Pioneering to the discovery of scientific breakthroughs that will address challenges facing health, the environment, agriculture, and nutrition. Discoveries that will benefit the world and qualities that exemplify CED's distinguished leadership. So I would ask you to all please join with me in congratulating Nubar for his leadership, for his commitment to corporate citizenship, and perhaps most importantly, for helping to realize the power of mRNA technology when the world needed it most. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to present Nubar Afeyan.
They really do make it difficult after these introductions to say anything. And those of you who are in the life science field know that being introduced by Ken Frazier is in and of itself the main honor. And so I want to thank him for that. Ken, all of us who work as innovators in this field, stand on your shoulders and learn from the example that you've set, both as a leader and an innovator. And Merck, for such a long time, has been the standard by which every company measures its success. So thank you so much for those kind words. I'm also deeply honored, as has been mentioned by all the honorees, to be in their company. I've learned a lot from their comments, and it's interesting. I shared at our table with Karen that tomorrow evening I will receive my booster shot at the CVS store next door. And the frontline workers that we talked about in the healthcare profession extend certainly to the totality of that industry, and certainly CVS has had a major role in that, so it's going to be my privilege to do that. And I heard from Judy's words, and I must say before my formal remarks that being a scientist entrepreneur, I already had a bit of a business idea, which I'd like to talk about offline with Judy. Here's the idea. Most places, they want to check your vaccine card on the way in. I would propose that Otis have a program where they check the vaccine card on the way out of an elevator and vaccinate people in the elevator. You have reach throughout the world. This will be done very quickly. So you can't leave Hotel California before. All right. So one of the advantages of being later in the program is the opportunity to hear from the diverse range of leaders and hear the common themes. It strikes me that all of tonight's honorees share the bravery it took to leap into the unknown during these challenging times, and the belief that whole new possibilities existed on the other side. That's what I think it's taken to lead in these difficult times. Now, I want to acknowledge my colleagues from Flagship who are here tonight, because they too exhibit these qualities, bravery and believing, every day. In fact, our whole method of inventing platforms in the life science industry is predicated on these leaps into the unknown. Usually unknowns in our case in biology and biotechnology, and that's where novel treatments and cures, transformative approaches come. They simply don't exist immediately next to where you already stand. And so this ability to leap is what I'll add to the conversation tonight. One example, a powerful example that demonstrates what can result from leading by leaping, is Moderna, a company that my firm Flagship Pioneering had the honor to found and develop some 10 years ago. It's the most well-known example, but it became an overnight recognized name 10 years in the making. The use of messenger RNA as a medicine in 2010 was completely a fantasy. In fact, many people called it that. Many newspapers called it that. And that was exactly the right place to leap to for us, because we needed to make that fantasy reality by doing science, not by arguing whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, but just by doing science. And what took us there is the belief that if it could be proven to work, then the results would be potentially impactful. Last January, even before we realized that the mysterious respiratory virus would lead to a global pandemic, Moderna shifted much of its development focus and resources towards a vaccine for COVID-19. Building on 10 years of this research and drug development, we were able to develop a safe and effective vaccine faster than had happened at any time in human history. As we stand here today, More than 1 billion doses of mRNA vaccine have been deployed across the globe. Moderna will increase its capacity from less than 1 billion doses in 2021 to up to 3 billion doses in 2022, build a comprehensive vaccine plant in Africa, and supply hundreds of millions of vaccine doses to the world's lowest income countries. Let me acknowledge the 2,000 strong Moderna team, whose dedication and hard work, really incredible work, together with partners at the NIH and many other important institutions from the government that helped. Let me thank them for what they did and the sacrifice that they made and their ingenuity. You see, one thing that isn't known is that January of 2020, we had made exactly 2,000 doses of mRNA ever. And we had applied it across 10 different clinical programs. And we thought we were well on our way to large-scale deployment of mRNA technology. As of now, we've made 600 million of those billion doses. And the real heroism has to do with people who, again, leapt with unproven yet unscaled technologies and did the best they could do, because we didn't really have an alternative. We couldn't say, just wait for another 2 years and we'll be ready and we're going to make these things. We just had to do everything we could. And fortunately, it's worked out, but really it's the people's dedication that did this. And it also opened our eyes to what's possible if you don't succumb to what it seems impossible. And that's really the leap that I think you'll hear about and you have heard about already today. Now, on a more personal note, the pandemic has, of course, had a profound impact on all of us. It created a sense of disruption and dislocation that is all too familiar to immigrants like me. When my family escaped the devastating civil war in Lebanon and came to North America, we started over in most every sense of the word: a new climate, new customs, new language, new ways of making a living. But beyond that experience, I want to share with you tonight that I also am a descendant of genocide survivors. More than 100 years ago, when the previous pandemic was raging, some 1.5 million Armenians lost their lives, and I'm a survivor. I'm a descendant of one of the survivors. Now you might say, what does this have to do with COVID-19? Well, you have to realize that 5 million people have lost their lives in this disaster. And while we don't have some person on the other side, some criminal we can point to and say they're committing a genocide, the net effect is 5 million lives were lost. And I don't know the names of these people, but one of them I do. His name is Shell, my father-in-law. And while we were working on a vaccine early on, my wife is here, Anna, she lost her father. So that is what's different this time around, is that instead of watching on television atrocities being committed in other places in the world, we are losing people right next to us. So why do I bring that up to you? It's because I think we're entering a phase when we've all become survivors. We're all going to experience what it's like to be a survivor of an unexpected tragedy, an unexpected dislocation. And I wonder if we're ready for that. All of us want to go back to normalcy. After civil wars, people want to go back to normalcy. But they don't realize that their neighbor is no longer there and their cousin is no longer there, and they're going to have to reckon with that. So one of the things I think an organization like this really needs to help with, speaking of mental health, speaking of leadership in challenging times, is the challenging times that are ahead for the next decades as we try to make sense out of what happened. I don't think we're going to be able to say something natural happened and now it's gone and so we're back. And that's something maybe not pleasant to hear, but since we don't gather very much anymore, this is my first chance to tell you that. My experience, though, there's a silver lining in all this, because I think those historically who survive loss and displacement emerge with a much stronger sense of life. In fact, many of them become immigrants and they deploy an immigrant mindset. And that immigrant mindset makes them very open to try new things, take risks, leap, innovate. They can imagine a new world because they had to inhabit a new world that is unfamiliar to them. They can invent with bravery and imagination because they have summoned the bravery to leap into the unknown and literally reinvent their lives, as we are going to have to do. If we choose to, we can harness the dislocation and disruption the pandemic has forced upon us, and we can tap that immigrant survivor mindset to reimagine, reinvent, and leap to new possibilities, even when the crisis subsides. So, thank you to all the brave leaders being honored here tonight, and to the leaps you've taken that have allowed us to survive and begin to thrive again. These risks to our economy, our society, and especially our planet require that we all keep leaping, keep innovating, and embolden others to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nubar, for those inspiring and energizing comments. As you said, as we try to work our way out of this tragedy, when I was at the U.S. Naval Academy, I taught about the Manhattan Project in my course, and it is really a privilege for all of us to be here tonight with the 21st century example of how great scientists can accomplish great things in a very short period of time in an historic way. So thank you very much for all you do. I don't think there will be a person who won't be leaping out of here tonight, so thank you. Now it is my privilege to introduce Julie Sweet, now Chair and CEO of Accenture, for our next introduction.
What a special evening, and thank you, Lori, for putting together this night, and thank you to all the leaders being honored tonight. It's so inspiring. I want to take you back for a moment to life before the pandemic, to January 2020. I was in Davos, Switzerland at the World Economic Forum in a big conference room with about 80 CEOs, and it was a meeting of the CEO Council that Brian Moynihan chairs. And we were wrapping up an invigorating discussion about a new reporting framework for ESG. It was a framework that Brian had pioneered with the support of the Big Four accounting firms. And in what is typical Brian style, as we wrapped the discussion, he paused. And he looked around the room and he said, "The framework's ready. It's not perfect, it never will be, but it's good enough. The only thing left to do is for each of us to commit to use it. And if we do, it's pretty simple. The world will be a better place." Today, 114 of the world's leading companies have voluntarily committed to a single framework across industry. I'm super proud, Brian, that we're reporting in December for the first time. This is an example of Brian's inspiring and super effective leadership, and his consistent belief that as companies, we have a role and a responsibility to contribute. In fact, in Brian's very first letter to shareholders in 2010, yes, it has been that long, Brian wrote, and I quote, "Bank of America is built to meet the financial needs of people, businesses, and institutional investors, to attract the best employees to serve our customers and clients, to support the communities where we work, and to create long-term shareholder value." Brian has been practicing stakeholder capitalism before it had a name. And he did so by relentlessly pursuing responsible business growth. And that meant when the pandemic hit, Brian and his leadership team were not only able to make sure that Their frontline workers were there in the communities, serving the people and keeping them safe. And that B of A would thrive and emerge stronger. But in 2020, they substantially increased their corporate philanthropy to $350 million. They announced a $1 billion 4-year commitment to further racial equality and economic opportunity through jobs, housing, businesses, and healthcare. And they invested nearly $6 billion in our communities. Brian's list of contributions are really long. And as someone who's only been global CEO for 2 years, pretty awe-inspiring. But the list is both public and private. I met Brian in 2015 for the first time. I just become CEO of our North America business for Accenture, and I was at the Business Roundtable for my very first meeting, and I knew no one. At a break, Brian came up and with no fanfare, put his hand out and said, "I'm Brian Moynihan." He said, "When I became CEO, I had a lot of help. And so if I can ever do anything for you, give me a call." And I did. And I so appreciate and am grateful for the advice and the mentorship, something no one would ever know. And that's Brian. The world's a better place because of Brian's generosity, because of how much he cares, and because he inspires each of us with the way he does things without fanfare, never about Brian or even about B of A. He inspires us all to work together to make the world a better place. And so tonight, Brian, I am so extremely honored to introduce you, thank you, to recognize you, my teacher, my friend, and most of all, my inspiration. Thank you, Brian.
Well, thank you, Julie. That was unexpected and wonderful. Chris, my son's up there, so remember that, Chris. And so thank you, Julie, for being here and taking time out of your busy schedule. In March 2020, when the markets were going all over the place, I went on Face the Nation. And I said, we're in a war against the virus. What I didn't know is Nubar was going to help lead us out of that. And as the old saying goes, if you're going to be in a war, you got to have a heck of a person in the foxhole with you. So thank you for all you and your company have done. But the other people that let us out of that, where the frontline work has been acknowledged so eloquently by Ken. I won't do more except to say thank you. And your boss, Michael's is very proud of you, as are all of us, of all the people around the globe that did what you do. I want to accept this award on behalf of my 200,000 plus teammates, including our frontline workers, those people in the branches that went to work when all of us went home and kept the economy rolling, not knowing what was coming through the door, not knowing you were supposed to wear masks for the first part of it because nobody knew it was a aerosol transmitted disease for a while. And they did it and did a great job, and they kept the economy going along with the teammates who did work from home. And so I want to thank all of them. But Lori, thank you and the CED for this honor. I accept it on behalf of my teammates. Thank you to my board of directors who work so hard to govern what I do and make sure that we do it well. The other leaders tonight are extremely impressive, and I have connections with all of them, with Karen and some work we do with them, obviously, is a big company, another big company, with Margaret and I sitting through many hours of trying to help make sure our industry does well, and many of them in many different ways. So I thank all of them. It's an honor to be in their presence. But as CEOs, we face a dual responsibility. We have to deliver for our shareholders and deliver for society. This isn't a new concept. Jim Collins wrote about this in 1990. Those of you who read his books, this is one of the concepts in those books. He called it the genius of the and, profits and purpose, delivered for shareholders and for society. It's the basis of stakeholder capitalism, as Julie said, a concept which is 50 years plus old. The idea is core to how our company works to support our teammates, our clients, our communities, and our shareholders every day, including how we responded to the health crisis. This is about leading in crisis, so I thought I'd give you a few examples of how we serve. The first thing we had to do is we're a people company. We had to take care of our teammates. And that was kind of an interesting thing. 100,000 people had to be positioned to work from home in 3 weeks. That's a lot of computers. That's a lot of screens. That's a lot of Wi-Fi. And the team that had to do that had to do it. We never thought these people would work from home. And suddenly we had 100,000 teammates. In addition, 100,000 had the kind of equipment that could. But then we had to think about what home was like. Go back and think about where you were in March and April 2020. The school is empty. So our teammates that were working suddenly became a tutor, a teacher, a lunch person, a hall monitor, and an IT person all at once. So what we said is they can't work in that condition, both physically and mentally. And so we started a program. We gave each of those teammates $100 a day to hire someone to come in their home every day. 4.5 million days later, those teammates did a wonderful job for our teammates. So how do we think about our clients? They too needed help. My teammates worked around the clock on many different programs that were only designed literally within days. We deferred 2 million consumer payments. Margaret did the same for her clients. Not knowing where it would end, we just said, don't pay us, you're in distress. We helped businesses raise more than $750 billion in capital in a few months to make sure they had liquidity and capabilities to continue on. We delivered 500,000 PPP loans with 10,000 people working on the program at the high point, working weekends and Easter Sunday for a lot of them. We delivered for our shareholders too. Our market cap from before the crisis is up over $120 billion, which means they got treated well too. But then we moved to our communities. Out of the gate, as mentioned by Julie, we pledged an additional $100 million to charity for medical supplies. Now think back. When you walked in here today, everybody had masks on. In March of 2020, there weren't enough masks to give these frontline workers to work. So we said, let's go out and get them. And it's worthy of a David Baldacci's spy novel, us getting the first 5 million out of China and waiting and fighting. It's a wonderful thing. But then we went broader. And the issue was, what about the community centers and stuff that need them? So we gave away $33 million masks so people didn't have to make a choice between spending money on a mask and spending money on some other need. As we think about the health crisis, then we moved to address other challenges facing society. An example was the environment. Next week I'll go to Glasgow for COP26. We have committed in the middle of this pandemic to be net zero by 2050 and committed to make substantial change in our operations by 2030. But the most important about moving on the environmental crisis or moving on the environment, as Julie said, is to get everybody to do their part. And so we've committed $1 trillion in financing over the next 8 years to help our clients make a just transition because they're the ones that have to make it. We're also continuing our longstanding work on racial equality and economic opportunity. Now, Ken Frazier has a group called 110 that was referenced, and it's been an honor to work with him on it. But when he came to me, I talked about some things we've been working on. There's a fellow named Raj Chetty and a fellow named John Friedman. John's from Brown, Raj is from Harvard. I went to Brown, so John would like to be first, but Raj did the research. They've done a lot of work on opportunity. We stumbled into this 5 years ago in Charlotte, when Charlotte was ranked 50th out of 50 of all the major cities. So opportunity meant, how do we create opportunity in our communities? And as a bank, we have an obligation to create opportunity in 2 ways, or as any company, in 2 ways. One is inside our company, and second is outside our company. We call it looking in the mirror or looking out the window. So what do you do in the mirror? You have to have diverse representation and opportunity in your company from top to bottom. And we measure it at every single level. Jerry Bronstein, our head of human resources, can show you the reports I get every month from our business leaders. We provide equal pay for equal work and have 2 firms test that every year, so it's not left up to chance. We now have a minimum wage of $21 an hour, and because we started 20 last year, and we've committed to raise that $1 a year. So we did 20 and 20, 20 and 21. We're not that inventive, so we'll get to 25 and 25. But what that really means is the same thing Margaret said earlier. Think about what the difference is. An 18-year-old kid coming out of high school working $42,000 plus full benefits, plus the training given, plus front-end reimbursement for that education they need. Think about the difference in those 6 years, where today in Charlotte there are 40,000 people who are under-earning what they could earn. Think about the difference working for a large company that all of you represent. If they can have that kind of wage, that kind of training, that kind of college reimbursement for the courses that are going to help them make, it's a whole different pattern. And so that's what we're doing. Now you have to look out the window. And so we looked out the window and saw how we could create opportunity outside. Julie referenced the $1 billion program, which we made $1.25 billion program. That program accelerated. It was already going on about opportunity, but after George Floyd's killing, we accelerated and doubled the program. My teammates came to me and said it's going to have to be a $500 million program. Ann Finucane and Tom Montag have been working out. I said it's going to be $1 billion program. And we announced it far before we knew exactly what we were going to do. And a lot of things that we've done are kind of interesting and fun. One of the most important things, really going to the question that John raised earlier, which is we've committed to 100 private equity funds that are run by women, Black, Latinx, Asian American, Native Americans who invest in companies from the same cohorts who obviously will employ people in the same cohorts. So 3,000 companies. Did it. Now, the interesting thing about that was we don't have a staff to do this. We're not in the private equity business. So what did we do? We raised our hand, and 28 of our investment bankers came over and started looking at all these firms, finding them, helping us do it, our 92 market presence. That's the spirit of the team at Bank of America, because they wanted to create the opportunity community, and that equity will help those companies grow. So we're just one company, and all of you represent great companies in this audience that have been around for long periods of time, as was said earlier in the Otis elevator case, which is 183 years old, 180. We're 230 something, so we're getting there. But let's think about this. The collective efforts we're going to have as companies goes to prove what Julie said. The private sector is the key to solve the big things that the world needs solved. Capitalism is the way to do that. Capitalism done right is the way to do that. And our job, as CEOs is to lead companies in a way that they do capitalism right. Our team, our customers, our shareholders, and our communities. It's not stakeholder capitalism. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for removing any doubt that we can have an economic recovery that provides equal opportunity and a sustainable future. So thank you very much. That concludes our evening. So let's have a big round of applause for our extraordinary leaders. Who are demonstrating unbelievable leadership during an extraordinary time. Our frontline workers, thank you so much for your heroism and your selflessness. Our introducers, for your inspiring remarks and your insights into our honorees this evening. Thank you so much. And of course, our sponsors, thank you for your support. And our trustees, thank you for your guidance, wisdom, leadership in helping us do what Nubar said we need to look at, which is how we get out of this pandemic, looking at the next decade to 2 decades to make sure that we're coming out doing the best that capitalism can be, making sure that we have equal opportunity and a civil and just society. So thank you all so much for this evening. And thank you, Steve Odlin, for your leadership at the conference board.
wish I